Welcome to the Scale Molder Geek. And after the last two huge dioramas I built, I decided to treat myself with a brand new cutting mat. How good does that look? So let's get serious now and build a character that I haven't built in almost a year now. This is Batman, but this Batman's very different. He comes from a world where, sadly, it was Bruce Wayne that died. It was Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas Wayne, who became the Batman. And he's a very, very vengeful Batman. This 3D sculpt is really nicely done. Some wonderful detail and it's got beautiful fabric texture. And it has, I think, about 6 parts in it. Because this isn't a huge build, I really wanted to focus on my painting. Now, I did have a couple minor issues during my printing process. With this cape, I originally printed it and I forgot to actually hollow it out, so it was quite a hefty, heavy piece, and I ended up getting some of these wavy lines in it, simply because the supports weren't strong enough to hold that weight. Rather than trying to sand them out, I decided I'd just reprint the whole cape, mainly to reduce the weight. And this came out wonderfully. Now the base that I got with it is quite nice, but I am going to customize it and add a bit of rubble around the edge of it. As usual, we need to start prepping all the pieces, making sure the joints fit together, and I'm just filing these lugs. I think they're called lugs. A bit of filing and sanding and constantly testing it just to make sure it all fits together. And because this was such a wonderful sculpt, there wasn't much to do there. Here I'm just sanding down some dimples that I got from the supports. And my other minor problem was I actually didn't put any proper supports on the holster of his gun. So it didn't print out too well, but the easiest way to fix it rather than reprinting everything, I'm just using some of this 2-part epoxy and shaping it to the desired shape that I need. And once it's all hardened, I then just file it into shape. And that actually came up quite good. Now the bats didn't quite stand correctly, so I decided to put his legs into some hot water to soften them up so I can then slightly adjust them. But I did run into a problem. I think I must have pushed them too far because they ended up cracking. And I ended up with these splits. In fact, I ended up with 3 splits through his legs. But it wasn't too much of a problem. With a bit of super glue, a bit of resin and a UV torch, I was able to sort it out. I think with my impatience I pushed the legs out a bit too far and ended up cracking them. But as you can see, come up really well, fixed. Added about half an hour extra work. Now off camera, gave him a bit of a coat of undercoat. And it was time to do the base colours. Now I'm starting off with dark sea grey. And I really like this grey because it's got a touch of blue in it. Now I made sure I got a nice even coat over it. Now one of the techniques I'm going to do in this particular build is I'm going to shade bats rather than doing all the dry brushing. So I added a couple drops of that black to the dark sea grey to give me a darker shade so I can do some of the recessed areas. And I'm just slowly building it up, adding a bit of depth to the actual colour. And you know what? I can see why he's always angry. Look at that wedgie. And for his boots, gloves and cape, I'm using this black from Vallejo. And that's just an even solid coat of black. Now I decided to do some more shading. What I've done is gone back to the original dark sea grey and added a bit of white to it, and I'm slowly building up the highlights now. I went through this process a couple more times, and each time adding another drop or 2 of white to the mixture. And that way I had a nice blend of highlights in there. As you can see, it's coming up really good. I'm really happy with this. Now the pans are grey, and I'm going to use this to dry brush the actual black areas. His boots and his gloves. To highlight his cape, I went in and got some dark sea grey and added a bit of black to it. I then airbrushed the raised areas. Now I also did go back to the black again, just to blend it in a little bit better. Really happy. I haven't done this technique before, but I was very happy with it. Now for the weaponry, some of this gun metal. and also those spiky things on his gloves. And for his utility belt, this red from Vallejo. By the way, if you haven't already, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. I would love your support. It will be greatly appreciated. Once I'd finished doing the whole belt with the base coat of red, I just added a bit of white to it and dry brushed it all down. This is just the first step of bringing out all the detail in his belt. In all the reference images, his belt is red, but I want to do a bit of a metallic finish to his buckles, so I came up with this idea by doing a base colour of this chrome. Once I did a nice even coat of that chrome, I then went in and did a coat of this clear red over the top. I did need to do a couple coats of that clear red, and it gave me this wonderful anodized finish. I was really happy with the way the buckles stand out from the rest of the belt now. And to glue the two halves of his body, I just used some 5-minute epoxy resin. Now with the head, I had some printing lines in there and I was going to sand it out. Then I decided, look, I'd rather just reprint it and get a perfect finish. It was all because of just the angle I had it set up on. So while that was printing, I moved on to the base. Now to customize it, like I said earlier, I'm just going to create a whole bunch of rubble at the bottom of it. And using some XPS foam, I'm just going to cut up a whole bunch of leftovers I've had from my previous dioramas. Using a hot wire tool makes that job really easy. And just glue them into place with some PVA glue. I have no plan here, I'm just building up until I'm happy with the way the rubble looks. And once I was happy with that rubble, I left it to dry for a couple hours, and then using some kitty litter here, I filled up some of the gaps. To hold that all in place, I used a drip bottle with a mixture of some white glue, some water, and a couple drops of dishwashing liquid. Now the dishwashing liquid is very important because it actually breaks down the tension of the water, and this helps the mixture soak through the kitty litter. Now the great thing about this stuff is once it gets wet, it actually goes soft, and you can then push it into place and shape it. I left that to dry overnight, and just using some flat black, gave it a nice even solid coat over the whole base. Now I've got this really handy bent brush that I made, and it really helps me get into some of the corners, some of the awkward places to get in. And when that was dry, I grabbed myself some of this primer from Rust-Oleum and gave the whole base a spray from top down. That was directly straight down, and this gave me some shadow areas. So when I add some of the washes, it gives me some wonderful tones through the actual rubble. And I'm just using some acrylic brown here and giving a really thin down coat of it. Then using a makeup sponge, I dabbed up the excess wash just to thin it out a bit. Now to add a bit more weathering to the base, I'm using some of this Vallejo streak and grime. And I'm giving this a rough coat over the concrete areas, so the base and the actual concrete blocks. The goal is simply just to add a bit of variation in tones over the whole diorama base. With all those tonal variations done, it was time to bring out all the detail, and I'm using this light sand from Ammo. And to finalise the presentation, I've got this really cool and cheap picture frame, and I just glued it into place there. Very nice. I was really happy I reprinted Batman's head because it came up actually really nice. So, time to add a bit of base colour to his skin. So I'm using some of this brown sand. And I'm just blocking in the colours. And for the cowl, some of this black again. Now I'll jump between those two colours until I get some really sharp lines. This particular Batman actually has red eyes. Now I'll block in the red colour and then do some touch-ups with the black. That way I'll make sure I get nicely shaped eyes. Now for the skin tones, I use a bit of dark flesh tone and some of this black red. And I mix these colours with a bit of white and some glazed medium and start building up my tones. I'll start off with adding my shadow areas and then blend that in. For the lips, I use some burnt red from Vallejo and I've thinned that down with some glazed medium. And after all that, there's our final result. And to finish off the cowl, I go back to Ammo's Panzer Grey and give it a nice light dry brush to bring out all the detail. Now I'm onto this Tamiya panel line accent colour in black, and I want to use this for his utility belt. And this will bring out a lot of that hidden detail. Back onto the 5-minute araldite, and I'm going to glue him onto the base. Finally, we're almost there. And also some more of that araldite on his shoulders, so I can actually adhere the cape to his body. And with his head glued into place, I just need to add one more weathering bit, and that is some pastel chalk, and I add that to his feet, the tips of his cape, and also some of the base. And all that does is bring him into the environment. This build was a lot of fun, so let's go and check out the hero shots.